pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we should probably make a change to the agenda and under general business. Item, I guess it'll be item D.
Yep.
No, yeah, item D, authorize the,
To hire the chief needs to be a formal motion by the council. The council didn't tonight or any previous time specifically delegate that authority to me, so the council will need to actually just pass a motion to direct me to make an offer under the terms we discussed, so.
okay. Any other changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion by Berg, second by Timmerman. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. I don't think we have any presentations or proclamations or acknowledgements. Public comment. So public comment's a time for anyone to approach the podium, talk about anything they would like that's not on the agenda. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Is that on?
It will be inspected contractor involved.
Just a couple things from Scott County here. Most of you know the YMCA has talked about planting here about 2-3 miles away out there. It will be their major topic on the township board on Tuesday night, the 5th, coming up here. I'm hoping they give a recommendation, whether it's a yes or a no. I hope they don't just pass it on. And then on the 11th, the Monday after that, so about a week and a half, it will come to our planning advisory commission, and then they'll pass it on to us. There's been a lot of concern about the noise and the traffic. It first had started out with taxes, and the taxes would go up about $3 to $5 per house. That wasn't a big issue anymore.
They got the information.
What's that?
Nothing. They actually got information before.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
and I think people knew that, but they said their taxes were going to double by that lot going into, that space going into tax exempt. Lately now it's the pool that they're going to put in. They believe that's going to suck up all the water out of the aquifer and nobody else wants water. And that's not true. There's people that water their grass from May 1st to October 1st and take up about 200,000 gallons of water per month. I'm not even kidding. This pool will have less than half that water in it. So it's not that. I've also heard people say that there's going to be these kids in the woods and mosquitoes are going to bite them and mosquitoes are going to breed and there's going to be 100 extra million mosquitoes around the area. I kid you not. Anyhow, so it's coming to an end here. But in the end, and I've said it before, the area is zoned for that type of a project, and I haven't made up my mind yet because I haven't seen it come to our board yet, so I can't do that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I just had 4 new houses come right out in front of next to me, and I actually wish I would have had a YMCA there with trees and stuff instead of houses. So, my opinion. Anyhow, with all this snow, our counties were a little bit worried about flooding. Every day that goes by that we have cold weather when there's not much melting of the snow, a slow melt, increases the chances that it all comes at once. And so that's something we're looking at. The building, we just okayed to go out to bid for the bonds on that, and since we have a great credit rating, the AA+, whatever, it's the best one, and rates are low right now, should save us a little bit, and in the end, it will not spike our levy, so we're still planning on just not like a school referendum where all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden you get a spike. We're just going to keep things even because we have some bonds coming off, and then we have something called OPEBs, other post-employment benefits that are about $3 million a year that will come off in the next year or two, so that can be put towards that. So it will be very nice. Hopefully at some point I can get up and show you on the screen what we're going to do out there. On Tuesday we had our board meeting, a discussion out at the Elko New Market Library here, And we talked about what we'd like to see in the next 5 years, 5, 10 years with Scott County, and, you know, development stuff came up. And, you know, a lot of people and commissioners on that side of the county, you know, are wondering about 169, the Shakopee folks and whatever. And I said, you know, we have an interstate in the city over here. So, and Kate, one of the commissioners and I went to lunch, and Kate was kind enough to say hi, and you know, I just told her that. And the other commissioners said, oh, we forgot. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are.
So I said, no, we got to, but you know, the tough thing is, you know, Shakopee, you know, the big cities, they have the big deep pockets. And I said, well, look at upland market with a budget of you know, whatever, a couple $1 million. Boy, it's tough to build something and, you know, have people, you know, have pad-ready type of stuff. So we're going to try to brainstorm a little bit and see what we can do, because, you know, as we're looking at building permits in the last 5 years here for commercial and housing, you know, there's Jordan, Prior Lake, Shakopee, Savage, all have a lot of growth, and upland market doesn't have much. So,
Thanks for pointing that out.
well, I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
right.
we'd like to change that. So I know you know it, but we'd like to change that. So anyhow, we're going to focus some attention on that and see what we can do. So other than that, I have nothing. Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is time for questions or not, but, you know, with the YMCA, if that were to potentially go in, how will that affect our fire contract or anything like that?
So that's a good question. I was trying to, we've been contacted, questions from residents, but we've been contacted, I think because it came up at the hearings formally by the county planning staff, for us to respond on that issue. And of course, our response is, tell us what the call load's gonna be, and then we can give you a response. So we're waiting for them to give us some information. We're in the immediate contact with Renee, so both Todd and Craig have been in contact on this issue, and they should be getting that answer back to Renee to go back to the county. The reality is if it's similar to, let's say, Majestic Meadows, the ranch that provides horse riding experiences for people with special needs, it may not be significant. From a police standpoint, it really has no impact for us because it's not our coverage area. We'll respond on mutual aid, but it's the sheriff's deputy. So occasionally you might have to go there on a mutual aid item, but it depends on the call, you know, how frequently that happens. With regards to fire, and to us, it'll depend on, you know, does that facility drive a lot of fire calls or medical calls? Again, we need to have the information. From a fire contract standpoint, it's just like any other business, any other use, any other type of property out there. Their overall fire calls are based on the formula that we established in the current contract. So if the number of calls go up over time, that may, driven by it, that may have an impact. But we're talking on an annual basis, we respond to hundreds of calls. So to have a meaningful impact in that formula, and that's only one piece of the formula, call load would have to be fairly significant.
So at the YMCA that they're kind of replacing from Prior Lake, there's been 5 calls in the last 4 years, and 3 of them were people that were basically, the kind of, it was tribe members that were not trespassing, but they got hurt on there, whatever. And then the other 2 were kids that had slight medicals. One, I think, had an elbow, and one had an ankle. So it just, and there was no fire call. So it's, they don't want a lot of noise out there, so, and fire calls. So I'd hope that's true, because I don't think they're gonna, they wouldn't pay any taxes into that. So, correct? As a 501c, they would not pay any real estate taxes.
Can't answer that, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well,
So you said the 5th, though, township meeting?
the 5th is the township, that's Tuesday night. You guys are gonna go?
That'd be fun, that'd be entertaining.
Great, that's awesome.
Do I need to post it?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Get there early. I won't be there. So, anyhow, I had plans that we set up about 3 months ago, and I didn't know that this was gonna be on, otherwise I'd have skipped that plan till the Wednesday morning. But anyhow, that's all I have. So, unless there's any other questions.
Appreciate you promoting our city and the
Yep.
rest of the county work.
Yep, good deal. Thank you all.
Thank you.
If
if we're not out of time yet, Tim Sadusky stopping by this evening on behalf of the Elko Newmarket Chamber of Commerce. I'll ask for your forgiveness in jumping the agenda ahead of time. I'll take a very short time and let you get to the important business. Coming by tonight, the Chamber just wants to make sure we do everything we can to keep our relationship with our city, our administrators, our council, as open as we can. We appreciate your work, your input. I can personally attest that having different council members, mayors, administrators in the past come to the meetings has been very helpful. As that spreads out, I know I get people come in and share rumors, and we're going to quell some of those rumors, give them some facts, share some of the exciting things that are happening. So trying to give back in a little way and share in what we're doing at our meetings. Recently, one event we just held at the Double Wide, so just a nice meet and greet, very well attended. Saw a number of you guys there as well. It's a way to bring people together, talk about the city, talk about what's happening. First quick comments, or when are you going to have another one? So when we get comments like that, it's a good thing. I know we're very excited as well. Coming up in March 26th, the city's going to do a lunch and learn, so we're happy to bring that, help promote that, share the excitement, get some people there. Starting to work on Ladies' Night. This year it's going to be April 12th. We're in the process of getting vendors to that, get that excitement started out. It's time to get out ahead of that a little bit. Community Golf Tournament is June 28th, round with fire rescue days as well. So that's set up and then planning is starting. Another step is opening up that communication lines, understanding sometimes we have the ability to be pretty direct as well. So if it's okay, and I think it will be, but to pose with our members and the public a little bit opinions on with that roundabout on 2 and 91. I know one of the questions on the open house was, which do you prefer, shut it down or keep it open? And so that's something, if we can help ask that question and be an input conduit back to the city, I think that may be helpful. I would certainly seek your opinion there. Chamber of Commerce currently emails out a monthly newsletter to all of its members and anyone interested in receiving it. Right now I think that distribution is about 350 people. So that's another way of providing good information to the city of Elko Newmarket. So again, thank you for the council members, the city's involvement, support, very, very important. If you do have any questions, I'll certainly try my best. If not, look forward to stopping back again and updating the city with what's happening.
Anyone have any questions?
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Once, twice, public comment is closed. All right, consent agenda. Anyone have anything on the consent agenda they would want to pull or get further information on?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion by Berg, second by Timmerman. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Public hearings, none. General business.
First item under general business is to accept the donation from the fire relief. The fire relief is providing the city with $125,000. Of that, roughly $6,500 is required to be provided to the city as part of the charitable gambling ordinance. However, the balance of that, the overwhelming majority of it, is a donation from the fire relief to our capital outlay fund to help fund equipment and supplies and assist with facilities for the fire department. The fire department has traditionally made annual donations. Certain years they've had a very good year from a charitable gambling standpoint. The taxpayers of the city and of the fire district, which includes Cedar Lake Township and Newmarket Township, have benefited from that. Those funds have allowed us to buy equipment for the department or buy equipment that helps us enhance the services that they can provide at no cost to the taxpayer. And so that reduces to a great degree the burden that would be on the taxpayer related to those smaller capital items within the department. So the members of the Fire Relief Board and the Chief of Police are here tonight to present the city with that donation.
Any discussion, or what do we do? You need a motion or something?
So from an action standpoint, I would need to
We're not
ask the
gonna not
council
take it.
to adopt resolution 1909, accepting the cash donation from the Elko New Market Relief Association. And then following that, we'd like to get some pictures.
So moved?
Motion by Bird, second by Timmerin. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. That's awesome, guys.
Yes.
125,000.
Way to go, right?
I don't know how you do it.
So did you guys bring the big check?
All right.
Medium-sized check?
So,
You're good. 1, 2, 3. Couple more. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
so impressive. Can I go cashless? Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
He said it's hard to wrap my head around how much money was raised from that
Yeah,
compared to
that's-
prior years. It's-
Tremendous amount.
What was last year? Remember last year?
Last year was
60
100. It was 100,000. In past years, it's ranged between 25 and we had some high years of 40. But in more recent years, they've been very successful, in part because they've also grown the number of premise permits that they have within the community. So they're currently in 4 or 5 establishments, so the revenues have been fairly substantial. Yeah, the taxpayers and the residents of the fire district have reaped the benefits of that.
Okay. Item D, request for waiver of fees.
City Council has received a request from the Recast family regarding waiver of fees associated with their connection to sanitary sewer. Their property is currently located on Xerxes Avenue. The property is currently on well and septic. However, there is a sanitary sewer line that does run in front of the property and does have a stub into the property that they would be able to connect to. They're not proposing to hook up to city water at this particular time. Their particular request is requesting that the city essentially reinstate the trunk fee waiver policy that was in place and established by the Joint Sewer Board prior to the merger of the cities and sunset back in 2011. That policy was based on the rationale that in the former city of Elko, for a period of time, they used general tax property revenue to fund a portion of the debt service related to the initial installation of the sanitary sewer system in the community. Some of the homes, obviously, that were within the community weren't connected to that system and didn't receive the benefit of it. And so there was a decision that there would be a credit given to those properties. Speaking bluntly, the dollar amount that was given to that was not, I never saw anything that justified the number. It was a number that was decided by the Joint Sewer Board, so it was a political number. And there is a decision about the sunset, and it was felt that once the city connected to the Met Council system, the wastewater treatment facility, for which was part of that initial installation of the system, would no longer be needed, and so they indicated that the system would then, or the waiver of fees for that particular fee would go away. Now, at that time, there was multiple fees. Each of the cities had their own trunk fee, and then the Joint Sewer Board had a separate trunk fee. With the merger of the cities, those fees got rolled together and were significantly reduced, and the current trunk fees only a little over $4,000. So from a staff standpoint, we would recommend 2 things. One, that if you do provide a full waiver, that it would only be for whatever the current trunk fee is, which is the $4,000, 4,000 some odd dollars. And then the other part of it is that this isn't discussed as a one-off. There are a number of properties that this could potentially apply to. That has been reduced somewhat from when the policy originally established with the improvement plan we have for the Woodcrest neighborhood, and we have a whole policy related to that provides for certain waivers, but based on completely different rationale. But we'd ask the council that if you're making a decision tonight, that you do it in the context of a larger policy discussion and not specifically the Lucas property, because they may not be the only ones that come with a similar request in the future. Are there any questions for either Rich or myself related to this item?
Go ahead.
How is this similar or different from any previous requests for waivers that we've seen?
There were actually only a couple of properties along Xerxes Avenue that actually took advantage of the waiver at the time. I think if you can imagine, there is a substantial cost to hooking up. You have not only, you're excavating, you're bringing it into the house, and then you have all of the fees associated with that particular hookup, which is in part why the Loop Paths are looking for some relief. So typically, we haven't seen that people wanted to do it proactively. They did it when they needed to. Their system was out of compliance. It was failing. There were limitations that were placed on them by Scott County, which regulates the on-site systems and what they could do with their property or with their home. And that prompted them to do something at that time. And so we've only had a couple that have come over the years. We have had some requests in the interim where people have been advised, no, that waiver doesn't exist anymore, you wouldn't be able to receive it. That tells me though, anytime you do something like this, if somebody was denied that option, you might get a request to apply that waiver retroactively or something like that. I think the number of people that might make that type of a request would be little or none. But if this waiver is provided, we have a number of properties along Xerxes Avenue and in that general area that have the ability to hook up and may be looking for this waiver going forward. That's why I suggest we talk about it in kind of the larger context as a policy.
When you say a number of properties, is it like 10? Or, I mean, what would you
I'd say
guess?
it'd be on that
About
order
a
of
dozen,
magnitude.
yep.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not 100.
Right. Got it. Any other, did you guys
And when did
want to
the-
make any statements or address the council at all?
You bet.
If you don't mind approaching the podium.
As you're coming up, when did the waiver policy sunset?
2011 when we connected to the Met Council system.
I'm Jody. How are you? It's my husband Jeff and Grandpa. They have lived here their whole life. We moved here as a married couple in 2002. And at that point, we didn't need to hook up. Our system is fine, and now we want to hook up. Before we bought the property, it was a rental property. And our hookup is now on the further side of the house, away from our hookup.
Uphill side.
It's on the uphill
The high
side,
side of the lot.
on the high side.
On the other side of the driveway also.
Well, right, so for us to hook up, we have to take down our fence, go from the north side of the house, cut up the whole front yard, and take off half our driveway to get there. With no guarantee that we won't need any kind of lift station or whatever. And I've talked to Rich Revering and he said, well, I don't think you'll need a lift station, but I've had people come out and they're like, well, we can't guarantee that. We'll go down and we'll dig down and we'll connect you. But he said, we're not gonna bore underneath your driveway. We'll have to take this part out and we'll patch it. Well, you patch an asphalt driveway and our driveway's not a short driveway. So you'll patch it and it'll sink and then I'll have to eventually take out my whole driveway. So we're not dealing with just a straight shot hook, which it should have been. But our neighbors to the north of us are on the hookup where we should have been on Xerxes and they should have went straight out onto Tarnigan. So for us, we're not only incorporating a minuscule amount to you, it's to the excavator, to the guy that's gonna hook up, bringing our fence back up, possibly having to take down a little bit of our deck, and putting our yard back together, and then see what happens with our driveway. So, and we do have neighbors that haven't even hooked up. I mean, that's the whole thing, is something that I feel like we've already paid for to bring sewer to downtown Elko when it was running into the street. Why are you charging us again? That's the whole thing. I shouldn't be punished for a working system at one time and then now having to circle back. And it's very frustrating, because if we get to a point and we need a lift station, are you guys gonna pay for it? Is the city gonna pay for it? You know, because when we inquired about where they put our hookup on that south side of our driveway, on the hill, nobody had any answers for us. You know, it was very frustrating because it's in the wrong spot, because our sewer is on the south, or on the north side, and it's uphill. So we're gonna pump our sewage uphill to come downhill, to shoot across the street and go back uphill again. It's, so, and, you know, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars, and we're just asking for some assistance of some sort.
So your budget is $10,000-$20,000, something like that?
We don't know, I mean,
That's
we have,
irrelevant.
it's irrelevant because we have to fix an error that was done when the city put the stub in. So we're left holding, we preferably would like to shoot directly out and hook up direct out.
There is a hookup, come out our door is here, sewer, the line comes out here, straight to the street.
See, the house is a walkout.
That's where it
Well,
should be.
every time we come to a council meeting, there's always a lot of new faces, so I'll try and educate as best I can. The sewer's been nothing but a issue. I live on Woodcrest Lane, they live on Xerxes. When these houses were built, all the sewers go out the back. We were always told the sewer would come down the back property line, which is exactly where it should be. Okay, they put it in Xerxes, and they want these people, everybody next door, those that have hooked up, go all the way around their house to the street. That's about the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Okay, the city will not admit that this stub-in is in the wrong place. They just will not admit it. We asked, what's the city guy's name?
Mr.
No.
Chair, or Corey.
He came out, well, he thought he was coming out to show us where it is. We knew where it is. I said, why is it there? It's in the wrong spot. He said, no, it's in the right spot because that's where the city decided it should be. There again, stupidest thing I ever heard. So they have to dig their house is a walkout, so you know it sits on a hill. Here is the low side of their lot where there is a stub-in. Here's the high side where their stub-in is. Well, the house next door, there again, dug all the way around the house to the back property line to hook up to that one. Stupidest thing I ever saw. Okay. Like Jody said, there's no guarantee they won't need a pump system when they get to it. Rich will not guarantee that. City engineered the project. Okay? Why was it put where it was put?
I'll give Rich a chance to respond, but for
Yeah.
this directive to us.
Well, like I say, Rich and I have been over this a dozen times,
I can imagine.
10 times at least. But like I say, every time the council says, well, I wasn't on the council at that time. Does anybody here remember when Gene Bensey was the mayor of Elko? That's when the city of Elko put in the sewer. I've lived in Elko my whole life, which is before some of you were even born. Okay, when they put that sewer in, I grew up here, the sewers in the Elko bars ran into the alley on the surface. They had to do something, obviously. So they put it in, and I went to the meeting, and I said, what's it gonna cost me? She said, are you getting service? I said, no. She said, then you will not be assessed. There's the key word, assessed. I was not assessed a penny. But you know what they did? They raised the mill rate, the max, every year. Where do you think that money went? To pay for the sewer. All those houses up in, well, I live in Ptarmigan Heights, which you guys never heard of. But up in Woodcrest, we all paid several years higher taxes to pay for that sewer. And we were always told you'd have a spot there. Yeah, if we're willing to pay through the nose to get it. So here we are. That's a very simple explanation.
Appreciate it. Anything further?
Well, I could go, okay, one more thing. No, I got all night, don't worry about that. Like I said, I live on Woodcrest, second house from the corner. We built my daughter's house 14 years ago, 13 years ago. The next house up the hill. Well, we knew there's sewer. We had Dick Thompson come in. Anybody know him? Yeah, because he has done work for the city. Reputable guy, done work for the city. We had him come, myself, my daughter, and the next two houses up the hill. We said, give us a price to go down the back where it should be, and there's supposed to be a stub in where that would have tied in. It doesn't matter, he can make one. He gave us a price, it was $15,000 a lot, he would run the pipe up the hill. What happened, Rich? You said, no, we can't allow private people to put in a line and hook it to the city service, basically is what the,
So it may have been my predecessor, but yeah, our company
right.
most likely did that.
So, we couldn't do it. So the city put together all this real fancy little packet, had it bid, you know what their price was per household? $45,000 a house. So guess what? We told the city to shove it. Well, I would like to have told them something else, but, so my daughter's house, the city ordinance reads 200 feet. If you're within 200 feet, they can force you on. Well, luckily, we've got 100-foot lots. She was on the third lot. They couldn't force her on. So we put in a sewer system, told the city to shove it, and we're living fine. But that's what has happened with the sewer system over the years. Just sick and tired of it. So, okay. I'll think of something else, but go ahead. No, it's just been an ongoing
It's a
pain
pro-
in our ass.
It's a nuisance.
Expenses that should not have to be, and here we are, you know. We paid dearly for this sewer to start with. Now we're gonna pay again? You're nuts. They can stay off the system if they have to and pump. And I've told the city before, my house, I hope it will never go on city sewer while I'm alive. And when I die, it's their problem. And I'm serious. I don't want nothing to do with it. It's expensive to use and it's expensive to get into. Don't want it, don't need it.
Understood. You made your point well. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
I'll think of something else. Go ahead.
Jody, Jeff?
Yeah.
Any
Well, we're just, I mean, it's very frustrating because we really don't want to tear up our whole property to hook up. We really wish for an ulterior motive to shoot straight out is what we really wish for. We would love to throw a speed bump on our speedway and tear up the street and hook up in the street is what we really wish to do. But
Or go to the one that's already sitting
we're already sitting
right
there,
there where we should be hooking up to.
right?
Right. I've been in the construction business before several of you were born. That hookup is a 4-inch. It will handle more toilets than you can put in those two houses. So there's no reason two houses can't use one service.
So,
But the city will not allow it.
so after you folks are done, I'm gonna ask city
Sure.
staff to comment as well, but I didn't wanna cut you off.
No,
before-
I mean, it's just been a very frustrating
Sure.
feeling. Because once all the bids start coming in, the companies start coming in, that's a lot of money. That's,
And
I
it
have 2
doesn't-
kids in college, I don't need to shell out $45,000 to hook up to a city sewer system,
Which doesn't increase the value of the house.
At all.
A nickel.
at all.
So, let me ask you, you had mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to do this, right? Or did I miss
We
something?
don't, but we prefer to hook up to city sewer. I would rather not have to pump all the time
Sure.
and deal with that either.
So if as a city council, and this is an if, but if we do come to the decision that we would be willing to waive something, that really doesn't guarantee that you would then hook up, correct?
Well, I'm speaking for myself, yes, I'd like to hook up. I'd really like to hook up straight out though. I'd really like to do that. Because that saves me a lot of money.
Well, the reason I'm asking is
Yeah.
because I think we'll have a good discussion about this. What concerns me is if we all of a sudden set a precedent that we would be willing
Right.
to do something, but then we just set a precedent for no reason. You see
No,
what I'm
I
saying?
truly believe that we will
Yeah,
hook up.
okay.
I'm hoping that we get an exception to go straight out the side of our house instead of up the hill.
Okay,
That's what I really want. I mean, if I can get a blessing to do so,
Sure.
I'd rather lose my apple trees than my whole yard.
understood, yeah.
And it cuts the excavation and everything else in basically in half.
And a possible pump system.
And a possible pump system, which I really don't want either.
Does anyone have any,
And a new driveway.
does anyone have any questions for the property owners? Thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's good to meet you. Finally, talked to you a long time. And Tom.
So, Rich, Tom, what-
So-
any comments on what was?
So the request was
laid
for a
out?
fee waiver, not for location of connections or anything like that. So there's no information related to that in the report. But Rich has had multiple discussions with the Lucas with regards to the location, so I'll have to defer those types of technical questions to him.
I could wing that somewhat. So there is a service on what they're calling the low side. It's actually was meant for the neighbor and it is in use. That neighbor has connected to it. We normally don't allow houses to share a service connection, despite the fact that Mike is right, there would be capacity. I'm not worried about capacity. What we worry about is a diaper or something getting in there from one of the houses that clogs it for both of the houses. And especially if there's a backup, but even if there's not, you've got to sort that out. Who's responsible for that? The city gets dragged in. Who pays for it? The city gets dragged in. So it's just practice in every city I know of that you avoid that. Every house has its own connection. You could choose to allow that. That's a.
So it is an option on the table, it's just not necessarily.
It's not one I
something
would
You would
recommend.
advise because if some damage were done, it
That
puts the
service will
city
be
in a
there a very
difficult
long
position.
time.
I'll
So-
give you, I'll give you.
We're not talking
Rich.
tens of years, we're more like, decades and decades.
Okay.
So
So there's nothing in ordinance or policy that says one connection, one household?
I would guess your ordinance does provide for that, and that would be a legal question then how you go around it. But it's pretty common that it's one connection per house.
Okay, before we move on from that point, Jody? or
Yeah,
Mike,
okay, so.
Which, I'm
circling-
sorry,
I have to come back out of here.
yeah, you do,
All
sorry.
Okay, so going back to multiple connections, our house has 3 people on 1 well, which is, it happens. I'm a realtor as well as Dawn. You go into these areas where they have multiple things connected to multiple things, you get an agreement signed. If you have to fix something, you pay half, done. So what we do with our well, we needed a new pump, boom. You pay a third, you pay a third, you pay a third, it's done. I mean, it's not unheard of. The whole thing is that Elko New Market is such a town of not wealth. So if you give somebody an option to do something that isn't the expensive way to do it, and, they just share the expense, you might have a lot more people coming together to hook up. I mean, it's just very frustrating, because when I saw those bills, I was not a happy person.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, thank you.
So Rich, there's this question about the stud was installed in the wrong spot, and that has come up quite a bit. I know when you've had conversations with Jody and Jeff about that, and Jody brought it up when I had discussions with her. Can you enlighten us at all on the wrong spot? Was it installed in the wrong spot? What was the rationale for it? Can you provide any additional information on that?
Well, I don't know if the term right and wrong is correct. It certainly would be less convenient from where their service comes out of their house because it's on the opposite side. And the terrain goes uphill on the road, but actually the grade where that sewer is about the same elevation as the outside of their house on the side where it comes out. And the sewer is fairly deep, so in looking at the numbers, if it was installed the way the plans show, there should be plenty of depth for that house to be served by gravity. But it does require a bit more pipe, it does require disturbing the driveway and restoring the driveway. As best we can tell, that service location was chosen because when the sewer was put in, there was already an existing water line and water service in that location. We typically pair these because most commonly houses hook up sewer and water at the same time, and they would dig one trench and put both in that trench. Now that's not true here because they've got a well in the back on this side, sewer, but typically, so you know, we don't know the situation beyond the property line in most cases. And so our best guess is it was chosen because there was an existing water service in that location already, so it was just put next to it. But I don't dispute that it's not the optimal location for this house.
Okay, and either way, we are where we are.
So the other option besides sharing the existing service and none of the agreements that were mentioned, I mean, I suppose they're possible, but the questions are already, who does that? There's nothing in place right now. Is that other owner even willing to consider it? I don't know any of that stuff. But it could be done that way. Or you'd create a new connection to the sewer pipe, but that would mean an excavation in Xerxes Avenue, which we really prefer to avoid, not only for the expense, but for the restoration. It's very difficult. The same concern they have about their driveway with, you know, their trips would be Xerxes with, you know, approaching 3,000 cars a day. If you have settlement, you've got patches, it's just a very difficult to get a good restoration.
So if I'm, and maybe I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying if we did allow what they would prefer to do, we're basically tearing up Xerxes out.
Yep.
And the cost then.
My hunch would be it'd be
comes back to
more
the taxpayer.
expensive than
No,
going to
the cost would go to the individuals doing the hookup.
Okay.
So when you weigh that cost against the other costs of going through the driveway and the additional pipe, there's an analysis there, but they would have to get bids from their contractors and allow it as an option to do a comparative analysis. That would be aside from the concerns that Rich has raised regarding the impact of Xerxes Avenue and its integrity by doing an excavation at this point. It might be different if Xerxes was close to the end of its lifespan and we were looking to rebuild the road at some time in the not too distant future. But in this case, you're digging all the way down through the subgrade in order to do the hookup. And that road, even though we're doing overlay on portions of it, it is some time before we're looking at actual.
Yeah. You also have detour, there's a lot of traffic on that road at certain times of day, so how do you manage that traffic? There's a lot of complications to opening that.
So it could be potentially just as expensive doing this,
I haven't put numbers to it, but I would,
and I wouldn't hold you to
I would
this.
bet a pretty nice dinner that it would be more to go into Xerxes than to go over to.
Okay, one more thing, and then I want to open it to the rest of the council for discussion. Andrea? What they had mentioned about a shared agreement, or some sort of legal agreement with the shared users, is that something the city would be open to or accept from a legal perspective? Is that, do we have any precedence of that?
No, we've never done anything like that before. The concern is there's no reason for the neighbor to agree to something like that when they already have a connection. Why would they take on any liability by?
Well, understood, but assuming hypothetically they did, is that, that's not something that we ever, that we've done before, but do you see any legal reason why we wouldn't entertain that at least?
I suppose that you could consider that if you can get both parties to agree
Okay.
essentially to accept, to share in the costs if there are any related, and if they both accept the liability.
Okay.
In piggybacking on that, I mean, it's 9-2-5 building sewers and connections, subpart D, separate building sewers required, the ordinance you're talking about, where it specifically says that they have independent building sewers for each building, so then therefore it would be prohibited by our ordinance.
That's the one I just sent it to you if you want to take.
Oh, so there
I
is
don't
an
know if you can
ordinance
pull
in
up your
place
email.
that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Okay.
So then,
It's standard practice.
so then in order to consider that, we would have to
To
do something with
an
that
amended
first.
ordinance.
Okay, so,
Just one other thought, if it for some reason was exposed, and you can certainly survey the stub elevation before the whole thing is dug up. And I thought that was done actually, but maybe not. And it was discovered that it would need a pump. That could change the equation on location. Maybe you look at opening Xerxes for some, but that would be a whole new kettle of fish. So I would recommend first checking the elevation of the stub in the ground to make sure it's viable.
okay. And to the rest of the council, I wanted to get a lot of those facts out there so we could have a good discussion, because there's a lot of different elements to this.
That's important.
Let's chat. I mean, there's a couple different things out there for us to discuss. The request in itself is for the waiver of the trunk fee, which we should discuss and make a decision on. But there are some other factors as well to that, but, who wants to go first?
I will. So I don't think we should do a waiver. If we're gonna change something, we should change policy and change the way that we would do this for everybody. Doing waivers just simply sets us up for failure in the future as a city, as a council, so.
And if we're talking approximately 10 houses, then we did change this ordinance, and that's a reasonable dollar amount.
I think it would be fair to say that, given the limited number of homes and the unlikelihood that they would all be doing this at the same time, likely happen over a period of time, financially, I don't know that it would have a significant material
Okay.
impact to the health of the sewer fund if the council decided to provide some sort of waiver for these limited number of homes.
Just one other bit of information that might be useful to your discussion. The homes along Xerxes were assessed for the sewer that went in there, and the assessment, I believe, was paid, including the Lucas home, to the tune of, it was over $8,000 that was assessed way back then. So it's not like the pipe's just waiting there paid for by someone, but they did help pay for that, so.
Okay.
I do agree with John. I think that if we're going to do this, we need to change the policy. And then kind of to piggyback on what Jody had said, with me also being an agent and doing rural area transactions also, I have run, and I'm not saying that this is a way that we should go or this is what we should do. I've seen plenty of shared agreements during transactions or sewage shared agreements where it's, kind of like cul-de-sac area, and each home has maybe 4 or 5 acres, and they have a well agreement or a sewage agreement, and when something comes in, they all split the costs up. And sometimes it's a little smaller association type where, they're paying a monthly and putting in the pot, then when something happens, the funds are there.
Sure.
So I've
Yeah.
seen that plenty of times, actually. But
The only difference here is that they're all benefiting here, the city is kind of
Right.
pulled into the
Right.
books for liability
Mhm.
purposes.
Yep, exactly, right. I get that.
So, John, you feel if we are gonna do something, it would be probably changing, or, I don't know, if changing the ordinance is the right term, but making a change that would apply to all parties. And,
Yeah.
Well, and I think it has to be a change that's specific to just this particular area.
Right.
We don't want to obviously change our fee structure because, a new subdivision comes in, they're paying the same fees to hook up.
Yep.
So, at some point, they're paying for that infrastructure because they're buying the lot, right? And then they're also paying the connection fees that they would, so it's all the same.
So basically homes that existed when
Yeah.
the sewer was first
And
put in.
so I think it has to apply to just these homes in this area.
The policy at the time did provide for certain criteria for, the intent was it was a home that was existing at the time the system was put in. And reasonably, again, the rationale was that there was some contribution, and Mr. Lucas indicated to that through general property tax levy, and it contributed to that at that period of time. The policy that joint sewer board established did not apply to homes that would have been built after that point. This house was clearly well before that point in time. So it was built in 79, wasn't it? No,
No, 73.
73?
That was the model home in the development. My home was the second home built in the development.
Yep, so the home, it clearly met those criteria.
Yeah.
Josh, Katie?
So we're talking at most 10 homes that would
Well,
possibly.
we haven't gone at it, so we're spitballing that number a little bit.
spitballing that number.
But it's
Okay,
not a
so-
significant number.
Okay.
What have we already done? I mean, I just am trying to rack my brain for the last 4.5 years or whatever when we started talking to Woodcrest. I mean, we've already, I don't want to say cut breaks or set up, but just, has there been opportunities in the past to hook up at reduced rates or, I mean, what other incentives have we've already tried, the city has tried to accommodate or to decrease the cost as much as possible, knowing that there have been some issues or,
Well,
and maybe I'm not saying it right, but.
So historically, we had discussions about the Woodcrest projects, that the city actually started talking about incentivizing people to get on, to get off of the IS, off their on-site systems. The primary rationale, if you read the policy up in Woodcrest, is that because of the nature of that neighborhood, there was a requirement for the lift station and due in large part because of that additional infrastructure cost, which was significant, that was part of the rationale. Even back when this policy was established, although there was some discussion, the policy itself really wasn't based on a rationale of getting people off. It was simply that they should be given a credit because they may have contributed to the system via other means previously. There wasn't that historic effort to get people off and provide incentives to do so until actually fairly recently.
Is there a way to actually figure out what that 4,000-ish number is, should be a way to get tax records from, or I mean.
So my involvement in that, I came on board about the time the conversation was starting to wrap up. And apparently they had contacted me and tried to figure it out. But what you're looking at realistically is a portion of the levy that they paid in those years went to service a portion of that debt during those years. And of course, that would have been based on whatever the valuations were for that particular home at that particular time. And ultimately, in the discussions I was involved, the Joint Sewer Board simply said, we're just going to put a number on it. It's not, I was told that the county. Yeah, it'd be different for every house, and I was told that the city had been told by the county, we can't provide you with the necessary information to do it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I wasn't involved in that portion of it, but I know that the number was basically, this seems fair. And it was based on that. It wasn't based on a very specific.
So it was somewhat arbitrary.
It was somewhat arbitrary.
And this is completely different than the Woodcrest discussion with what we had talked about previously. I mean, I would personally tend to kind of lean with what John and Don have suggested. If we're going to do something, we do it for. I'm a little concerned if there's other properties, not just necessarily in Xerxes, but other areas within the city that might fall into the same realm.
So if you look at the areas in the city that currently are not hooked up into the system, you're looking at the Thomas Avenue area, but those were large, unlike this area, those were large lots. And really were designed to have primary and secondary sites and have the ability to maintain systems for an extended period of time. I don't foresee that there's going to be a need or we're going to be asked to go out there for a significant period of time, and if we do, it's going to be kind of its own animal. Woodcrest was the largest area where we had a concentration of those lots, and we already have a plan and a policy in place to address it. So what we're really looking at is properties along Xerxes, in this case, where there is sewer available. So you're really looking at a stretch, Rich, from basically Ptarmigan down.
Well, a little further than to Beard.
To Beard,
And some
going
of those are
south,
already
that
hooked
stretch
up.
in there. And a number of those homes are already connected. So there really is a limited number of homes that would be impacted by whatever decision the council makes.
Any further thoughts?
Well, I'm leaning with you guys that if we're going to do this, I think we need to change the policy so that it affects all of these people. Scenario-wise, this is the only area that you can think of, is what you're telling us, that will be affected by this policy change that we're going to do would be just this area of Xerxes.
Depending on the rationale, that's for why you're doing it. I think I don't think we have any properties on the former New Market side of town that are still on well and septic. I think everything is hooked up or has been hooked up over the years. So again, we're looking at a limited number of homes in a fairly defined geographic area.
Other than and that's not even occupied now, but the Fisher property, I think that one's.
That house isn't there anymore.
Oh, isn't it? Okay.
I guess I'm wondering what the rationale is to change the policy. Let me explain. I mean, that's what I'm wondering, why we would change a policy.
For
I'm
just a few
curious.
houses or
Right.
whatever?
Right.
I see what you're
I
saying.
mean, if I get a group of neighbors together and we don't like something and we want to get the policy changed, I'm wondering what is the legit, besides the cost, because I appreciate that, but I don't know.
Wait. From my perspective, if there is some, even though the numbers are loose and somewhat arbitrary in the past, if money has already been paid in to do this, they're basically paying something twice. And that in my opinion would be the rationale to look at addressing this.
I could see,
So-
Rich is probably going to say exactly what I'm saying, but I think there are two potential rationales. One is the one that the mayor just pointed at, and because that was the rationale originally for the policy, was that there should be some consideration given for contributions to the system for the same purpose that the trunk fee is intended. And whatever that fair amount is, that's a policy decision. The other item is potentially to incent people to move off of their on-site systems. I think there's a legitimate policy position there. The question is whether or not you want to incent it and to what degree.
Well, I was gonna, along those lines, I think that managing individual septic systems, SSTS, in an urban area is very different than managing them, which the county does in more rural areas where you have more space between properties, larger properties. They can't be here all the time. When these systems fail, you can have discharges that might go unnoticed or unreported for a very long time, and I think that's a public health concern. I don't know that it's a huge one. I think there's some protections there, but that was part of the rationale for wanting to get these systems onto the city system. Once they're connected, they don't go back, and so they go away.
I mean, I think if we do some sort of, whatever we want to call it, I think then it's prescriptive, and it can't be the shared thing, obviously, unless we're going to change the ordinance that way. It has to, the 4,000, I guess, I just think is an arbitrary number, so, I think it's, I don't know, I could argue that it should be $1,000 or $2,000, and I guess nobody's going to tell me I'm wrong, because we have no idea what was actually already paid for. So I think we have to be careful on how high we set that to.
Yeah. So, I feel like we have some consensus that we don't necessarily want to do a one-off waiver on this particular item, but there is openness to looking at a policy to address all these areas in which the Lucas could then still benefit. Is that, anyone disagree with that? So if we were going to do that, would it be possible for city staff to kind of drill that exact number down of the number of properties that would be affected?
Yes.
Could we put something in where if we don't change this all, and then nobody still hooks up, and to even tier it, maybe that gets it too stupid, but you get the full 4,000 if you hook up, you get 2,000, in a certain amount of time, or make it,
Make it easy for them.
right.
What we're seeing is that until they have to, which is what Tom mentioned earlier, there's no reason to hook up. Even if they can save some money, they save far more by not hooking up. We've seen that even in Woodcrest under our program. We offer an incentive for people to pay a share of the force main when it becomes available to avoid having to later pay the connection fee. We've had one party out of probably a dozen accept that. So,
Okay, so I think we're at a point to direct staff to look at
Exact homes.
the exact homes and basically like a uniformed policy, or I don't know how the best
Yep,
to describe
so
it, but.
Let me try and throw something out there. The reaction is that you would be directing staff to prepare policy that would provide for a waiver. We're gonna leave a blank as to what that is.
Maybe some example, I mean, we could probably do the
Or-
math then, depending on what the total impact is going to
But
be.
basically define, prepare a waiver policy for the homes that we're talking about that would meet the criteria in the previous policy. So we clearly upfront identify these are the homes that are affected by this policy in this geographic area. To prepare that, I guess really the one direction we need is what would be the consideration that we've provided. Is it a waiver of the entire trunk fee? Is it a set dollar amount? Is it a portion of, percentage of something?
I would feel the trunk fee.
Trunk fee
That'd be my
The
suggestion.
the trunk fee.
would be my suggestion.
Josh?
I think it's giving them a good deal, but yeah.
I mean,
Less.
are you opposed to that, or I mean?
Well, it doesn't really matter if it's either, so I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think it could/should be less, because there's no way that was probably paid for in that period of time. So now we're giving them a better deal because they have held out or haven't had to hook up compared to the rest of the 98% of the population that has.
Okay,
If I could comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
please. Sorry.
Sorry. When you bought your home, I don't know where any of you live, not a one of you.
Windrose.
How many of you bought houses in the city on existing sewer and water? That's all?
I don't know,
I think
we
we
built,
all
so I
did.
don't know if that was all, I mean, we
You're
built
on
the boulder.
existing
sewer.
Yeah, yeah.
You're on existing.
Yeah.
So you bought a new house knowing you would have to pay obviously for a sewer. I built my house with the intention of never hooking up to a sewer. I could live the rest of my life, and I will, on a house that is not hooked up on sewer. You had the choice. You are forcing your choice onto me. I don't like that.
Did you build your house with the sewer system of your choice, knowing that there was a chance that you were gonna have to replace it in the 40 or 50 years of its lifetime though?
There's a possibility.
Right.
And I can do that considerably cheaper, and my lot is large, quite large. I've got the room, I can do it considerably cheaper than what the city is gonna charge me to hook onto their system.
And you still would have the option though, of if you have the room in your lot, as far as I understand, to put a second sewer system in to
Right.
replace it.
I believe
You're
that
not being
still
forced,
exists. Yep.
you're not
Yeah.
being forced to
Well-
do this.
Part of my family is gonna be forced. I don't like that either.
But
But
the
that-
scenario's a little different.
Right.
Well, no, because if you bought a house, well, there's a lot of new houses in this area, and they would not exist if the housing development I live in didn't exist in order to pay for the initial. I realize it's been expanded 50 times. I realize that. But had it not been for Woodcrest, and Ptarmigan Heights is where I live, Ptarmigan Heights, these other houses would not exist. Because the downtown portion of Elko, the old portion, was retired people. Basically, there was very few families and the 3 bars. Now there's only 2, nobody even knows where the third one was, do you? But that's beside the point. But they would not have been able to put in the sewer system that has expanded to what it is today had it not been for those houses up there. We paid plenty for it. And if you come into the city and buy a new lot, you are paying for the sewer. That's obviously part of the house. I don't want anything to do with that. I built my house, I built 4 houses in the city of Elko, lived in them, and never put in a sewer. I didn't want it. Today I don't want it. So you have to understand, you are forcing a system we don't want on them. You're not gonna force it on me. But
Let me back up a second. How are we forcing is there room to replace an existing SSTS system on their property?
there is on my property.
But is there on theirs?
Probably not, possibly.
Okay, so it's not us as a city council forcing anything, this is the county saying this system needs to be replaced. If it
I can't imagine where they put it.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
This
is
goes
the-
back to when we built my daughter's house, they were gonna force it at 45,000 until we told them to shove it because we were more than 200
Right, but I
feet
think the
away.
mayor's point is that in the circumstances that we're talking about, and Jody and Jeff's house,
Okay.
the city
But
isn't
we have
forcing
to
anything.
understand
They're
some
approaching.
background as
We,
to what went
we
into
understand
this
all that, but I
whole
think
process.
the question is, we're not forcing them to hook up, they're approaching the city about hooking up.
It's Mike, right? Mike, I remember you came to the Woodcrest meetings, right?
Several.
Yeah, and I remember you came to you make good points, you're very vocal, and I respect your opinion. And I remember saying that from, not this seat, but one of those other seats, we have zero interest in forcing anyone to do anything. We just want people to be in compliance, and that's really all we care about, and that's really all.
Okay, there
we
you
care.
go. Now you're looking at it from a different angle, but there will be, if they are not in compliant, there's actions that can be taken
But
against them.
that goes out of our hands. That's not the city has no say in that, it's the county that says that. Well, all we're trying to do is provide some flexibility of options, so we as a city are not forcing you to do anything. We can't control the amount of space that's on the property itself, and that's really kind of what the issue is here. So I respect your opinion, and honestly, if I were you, I'd probably feel the same way. But I don't want you feeling like we as a city council are forcing anything upon you. We're just trying to help come up with a solution. And it seems like we're
looking
open to
at
having a discussion.
This
about
level of
this.
government won't force, but the next level of government has the ability to force.
I'll concede that.
But, yeah.
No,
If you bought a newer home, obviously you were paying for the sewer. We
Right.
live in existing homes,
Right.
and like I say, hopefully I'll live a long time, and my house will never go on your sewer. And that'll make me happy as a pig, and then I'll have to burn it down. But just so you understand, we may not have an option, whereas you did
I understand.
when you bought your
Right.
home.
Point taken.
They're two different things.
Thank you. Okay,
So,
so,
before we move on,
yes, sir.
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate. I think removing the entire fee would take away from why we have a fee structure to begin with to connect to our system. So, I would propose that it's a reduced fee. And I think that amount should be 50%.
Any other thoughts on that? I mean, really, is this something, the actual dollar amount itself, is that something we really have to decide at this particular meeting?
Well, if we're gonna draft a policy, we need to know what we're putting
What
in the
that does,
policy,
okay.
whether it's a specific dollar amount, a full weight, 100, or a percentage, either, like 100% of the fee, or 50% of the fee, or 35%.
Could we decide on that dollar amount once we realize how many houses it's going to be affecting and how much it would impact us, depending on if we want this scenario or if we want this scenario?
Yes, we can
Okay.
draft the policy with a blank in it. It's just staff saying, oh, we want to make sure it comes as a full package up front. But if that's a discussion you want to continue to have, there's no reason we can't draft the policy with a blank in it.
I think that-
regardless, it's still gonna be an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're just making an arbitrary number based off another arbitrary number. I mean, so, pick a damn number. I
It'll
mean,
boil
I
down
don't
to
know
what feels right.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it would behoove us to look into, if there's 10 homes at $4,000, or $40,000, is it, I mean, come up with numbers and decide from there what we're looking at losing.
I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with just calling it the trunk fee, but, I mean, you guys make good points. It's, you know, I think you probably are both, well, you're playing devil's advocate, but I think you're picking back on Josh's point in that really, we're really picking arbitrary numbers out of the air. We really have no basis of,
We are,
Determine
but,
that,
you know,
right?
so they were assessed through taxes, part of the system, right? Their lots, when they bought them initially, were cheaper because they didn't have sewer already connected to them, right? So a lot that has sewer, correct me if I'm wrong, Dawn,
Yeah, you're
but
right.
a lot that has sewer versus a lot that doesn't is gonna be much cheaper from that perspective. So when you Josh bought his lot and built his house on it.
Wait a
bought-
minute, what did you just say now? Sorry.
No, that's not how it is.
No, it is the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, the lots are, you're gonna pay more for a lot if it's already hooked up.
To sewer and water.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I just said.
Oh, okay, I thought
Yeah.
you said the opposite.
No.
Okay, okay.
No, so
Okay.
in Josh's case, he bought a lot that was already hooked up to sewer and water and built a house on it. If that lot did not have sewer and water hookups on it, he would have paid much less. So, in essence, he's paying, because he's paying that dollar amount for that lot, so he paid for the sewer improvements through that, right? So then there's still a connection fee. They still have a connection fee. Granted, there's some history with this whole process with those particular homes, because there was a waiver portion at some point with the old sewer system. So, I think that, and I think we should give them something. I think we should do something with the policy. But one way or another, everybody has connections, and they have connection fees, right? So, what we don't want to do is make a policy that's going to then remove connection fees for a certain part of the community, and then all of a sudden, the next development that comes in and says, I want our fees at half. You just did that for these other people, and they're going to use that same justification, what I just said. So, we just need to be careful that we're not putting policy, changing policy drastically that is going to put us in a bind the next development that comes in. So, we just need to be careful.
That's a great point. We'll take it. Kate, Josh, anything?
If I could comment on that, we bought lots we bought lots at a cheaper price, but we did put in a drain field. I mean, we didn't buy the lot, and that was the end of the expense. We did put in drain fields. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay.
And then they were assessed a fee that we don't know the exact amount, correct?
Yeah, to realistically go back and figure out what it was,
Yeah,
we would
which we
have to
can't.
have the levy documents at the time showing the specific, I mean, it was the mid-1980s.
Right.
So we have an intern for it.
I just don't think the records exist anymore.
How
So
fun would it be to
I
find
don't
it,
think
though?
there's any way to realistically even try and reconstruct it at this particular point in time.
I don't know if we could reconstruct it, but we could.
No,
I mean,
but you
I
can
think you
use
could
that
use a-
in your policy.
What could be a-
People are
I don't
questioning.
know how, but the problem is we don't know how much it was, we don't have any of the information to be able to sway it either.
Are we gonna run into any trouble as we pick this magical number to run into the issue of, well, now it doesn't improve our house value by anything, and now you just picked a really arbitrary number?
This is a voluntary,
It's not a- it's not an
Okay, so it
assessment.
doesn't-
It's not an assessment for that would play.
I think we should table the dollar amount piece at this very moment. I think provide staff direction to prepare a policy on doing this with an open dollar amount number. Maybe give some time to think of different avenues to where we could find a number so it's not completely arbitrary. And then have us then continue this discussion as the rest of the council feel. Seen heads nodding.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, does that seem like reasonable direction?
Yes.
So, the good news, bad news. Bad news is we did not grant the waiver today. The good news is, I think if you heard from all of us, I think we all want to find a way to help in some way. We directed city staff to approach this on kind of a broader sense, so it's your neighbors as well that could benefit from whatever we put together. And then when we do come back and if we do adopt a policy, then at that point you'd be able to take advantage of it and then get the credit. So, is that seem fair or at least reasonable at this point?
We wouldn't be able to look up just right anyways.
Okay.
That's what I was just gonna ask, how soon, I mean, I don't think that they can go do anything soon, so.
Okay. All right, then that's the plan. All right, well, thank you guys
Thank
very
you.
much. All right, let's move on to architectural services for the police department remodel.
The council will give me a minute
Sure.
to set up for the presentation. So the council tonight is being asked to authorize architectural services for the police department remodel. We're asking you to approve a professional service agreement with Leo A. Daly to provide architectural services to initially phase one, prepare concept plan budget work for the police department. This would include facility assessment, a needs assessment, and operational analysis to help us determine what the floor plan would look like essentially, and then develop facility planning options, basically develop conceptual options that the city can take a look at and decide this is what we actually want to build. I think it's helpful to understand the history of the police department building. This is a picture of the building prior to any renovations. You can see Chad over there on the right. That was just as we began doing the work on the face of the building. So the police department is actually a 102-year-old building. It has seen, I understood there was a fire in it at one point. They've done some work on it, but the base building is 102 years old. It was primarily used as the classic one-room schoolhouse until the 1950s when the Independent School District of Lakeville was established, and then the students, of course, went to Lakeville. And then at that time, it served as the Elko City Hall and the post office. The City Hall took up roughly the southern 2/3 of the building, and the post office took up about roughly the north third of the building. Upon the consolidation in 2007, the City of Elko staff consolidated here at what's now the current City Hall, and then the police department was relocated from lease space that they had out in the Newton Circle Industrial Park area to the Elko City Hall. At that time, we did an initial remodel on the building, and that was intended to be an interim solution. We put some walls basically in the center of the building to break up the space, provide for an evidence room, an interrogation area, breathalyzer room, storage and locker area, basically that portion of the building. All the other walls existed at that time. We simply just threw up a few. Well substandard from what we would consider to be modern police department and professional office space. It was better than where they came from. And it was cheap. It cost us $16,000. So we recovered in less than a year on lease savings the cost of doing the remodel. In fact, just what we saved on lease savings also paid for the much more extensive remodel we did to City Hall within 7 years, both projects combined. So when this was done, it was intended to be an interim situation. So how long is interim? In 2007, it wasn't going to be long. We had a projected population of 13,000 by 2020, a population of 20,000 by 2030. We were projected to grow by 240 single-family homes or their equivalent on an annual basis, and we had built just the year before 140 new homes. Interim was not assumed to be long-term. So we fast forward 5 years later, it's 2012. We built 4 single-family homes the year before.
Hey, mine is one of those.
We built 49 single-family homes since 2007. This included any townhomes or twin homes as well. And the impact of the recession continued to be felt in a residential housing market. Interim now appeared to be longer. If you take a look at just assuming the same, we're going to get back to that same growth rate, everything had kind of shifted about a decade by the time things ramped back up. So interim now is looking to be like it might be a decade before we would see that kind of growth and have the tax base and the population to, one, justify the need for the larger department, and then have the tax base to be able to afford construction of it. Council needed to find a different interim solution than just building a new police department. And so what we arrived at was a phased renovation of the police department. There was the need for the longer term strategy. It was lower cost than the construction. It did not require any acquisition of land or a site to put it, and it would address the deferred maintenance issues with the existing asset. It provided flexibility. We could push out when we needed to build that department. When you're building a new facility, you don't build it for today. You're building that facility, which has a long lifespan for 30, 40 years into the future if you can. And so this pushed out building that department, which would be built for a substantially larger department, a substantially larger space, and it would put it out to a time where we would more likely have community tax base that had proportionally grown and could support the cost of that larger department. And it was assumed that interim period might be up to 15 years. So the council looked at a phased approach. Phase one was making the police station handicapped accessible. As you saw from that previous picture, there were these rickety, non-code standard cement stairs, which I can tell you the steps were about this deep and were about this tall, and they're pulling away from the building, and there's no way that you could get anybody who had any special needs in or out of the building. Handicapped accessibility improvement to the front entrance was completed in 2013. Phase two was to construct a police garage. At that time, when we relocated from the industrial park, we were parking the squads where the ambulance now parks up in the Church Street building. So when officers came to work, they had to show up at the building. They had to get in the car. They had to drive the car over to the police department, go inside, change, go get all the gear that needed to be in the car, go take the weapons and everything, put those in the car. Then you'd go out on patrol, and when you got done with your patrol, you had to do the whole thing in reverse. There was an inefficiency to it, so we lost some patrol time, but it was manageable.
But the list that was changed in there one time, I got to see that.
Okay, now I'm stuck with that image now. The police department garage was completed in 2014 along with the paved parking lot. And phase three was tuck pointing the exterior of the building. We're not aware of any time. There had been patchwork, but we're not aware that they'd ever done a full tuck pointing on the building, which is part of the maintenance on a brick building, as far as we know, in its lifespan. That was completed in spring, summer of 2015. The fourth phase was to do interior improvements to meet code, OSHA, and ADA standards. Now, the initial remodel was, we're going to leave the existing walls. We'll clean up some of the finishes. We'll put a little lipstick on the pig, if you pardon the expression, and we'll build out the space where the post office had formerly been. The total cost of the improvements phases 1 through 3 is about $325,000. So where are we at today? Well, we're here. We've got the garage, we've dealt with a lot of the exterior issues related to the facility. It's much more operational as it relates in many ways. For example, the garage just didn't provide efficiencies for going back and forth across town and provide valuable storage, but it also provided a sally port situation with regards to suspects. Previously, if you had a suspect, remember that gravel parking lot? You had to park in the gravel parking lot, leave the suspect in the car, and then you had to take them up the steps into the building and back out of the building if you needed to do anything with them. Can you imagine doing that when it's slippery, snowing, you have somebody who's, let's say inebriated and their stability is not particularly great? It wasn't terribly operational. And you're doing it outside in an enclosed space where if they decide to book it, I don't know, that's a technical term, Craig?
That works.
Okay, if they decide to run for it, there was potentially a threat issued for the public or the officer themselves, so this was a relative benefit. I've all received at some point tours of the facility, and I had this really neat thing where they're supposed to show up individually, but they're overlapped. But the facility itself suffers from decades and decades of deferred maintenance. So where are we at today? Well, how long is interim in 2019? Well, population projections have been significantly reduced. We still, believe it or not, are still projected to be one of the highest growth areas within the metro area, but at a much more subdued rate than what it was projected to be a decade ago. Our population is expected to be 8,600 by 2030 and almost 12,000 by 2040. The impact of the recession has continued to be felt in our residential housing market. We are starting to see increased interest, but we're not doing 240 homes a year. Our current projections are that we reasonably would be expecting something like 70 to 80 homes a year, less than half that. Interim is now significantly longer. So the decision is, let's take a step back. Let's hold on to renovation and review the scope and nature of the context, okay? Joe will recall this, Kate will recall this, Josh will recall this. Steve and I came to the council in 2017 when we were talking about the 2018 budget and said, hey, we were originally supposed to do the project in 2016, and then we're supposed to do it in 2017, now we're supposed to do it in 2018. But let's put it on hold. We want to take a step back. One, the floor plan that was used for all of those assumptions was based on, let's just say, did not involve architectural individuals from a decade earlier, and at the time the post office was involved, and so assumed working around that space and backfilling rather than assuming a clean slate. Two, the understanding for the space needs in the department has changed over time. At the time we did this, the department didn't have the same number of people. They hadn't used the space. And speaking frankly, the individuals that were involved in the department didn't have the same breadth and experience that our current officers have with regards to this facility and other facilities over the course of their careers. It also, there's things that, like I said, it was substandard space. We got in there cost effectively. But we don't have good way to confine or secure subjects. We have lack of emergency power, we have poor ventilation in the evidence room, and there's no decontamination options for bodily fluids or hazardous materials. We also have found mold in the building, et cetera, et cetera. The term being housed in the current location, building, it's, as we talked about, it's no longer. So we need to take a look at how we view that building. It's not like we do a quick remodel. The police department will get someplace else and we'll come back later and remodel it for some other use. We now have an asset which is continuing from deferred maintenance, and we're looking at the police department having to be housed there for a much longer period of time, so that changes maybe how you're going to approach the design and what you build. As I mentioned, issues that we have with it is mold, exterior interior water penetration, significant heat and cooling loss, weak deteriorating subfloor in certain locations, broken windows, holes in exterior siding. We know that some of the windows, the sills and everything are starting to rot out. And as you all know, there's a significant portion of the building that basically has spray foam sprayed on the outside of it to provide insulation and possibly structural integrity. We want to seek to maximize the police department overall usable life of the structure. We have an existing structure that will remain there regardless of what we do. Simple logic tells you that if I can put this amount of money into this thing that lasts this long, or I can put this amount of money into something that lasts, let's say, the same amount of time or even a little bit longer, it's more cost effective to put the investment into that existing asset. And that's been the logic behind the approach we've taken so far with regards to the phased improvement. Previous police chief told me that he believed that if you could go in and basically wipe the slate clean and design the space from the ground up, and given what we know now for growth assumptions in the department, which are driven by growth in the community, that this facility has the potential to last up to 20 years or more as the police department. Now, obviously, if we start building 200 homes a year, that may accelerate it, but that's not how the assumptions we have today. So if we started with a clean slate, so Melissa was tasked with come up with something that looks reasonably close to what it might look like. Now, Melissa's not an architect, but she's an officer, and she consulted with other officers about what the interior might look like. So she took a basic architectural program, kind of built out the space, and shopped it around to a number of reputable contractors to find out ballpark, order of magnitude, how much is it going to cost to get into this space. Now, as you know from our budget discussions, that range was fairly wide. It ranged from about $800,000 to about $1.4 million, and there's reasons for that. One, the amount of time, honestly, they took developing the recommendation or their estimate. Two, how much contingency they built into it, and so on and so forth. But it gave us a range of where we might be, that this is going to be a larger project. We're going to have to finance it. It's not going to be $200,000. It's going to be a significant investment. We also know, however, that it's not likely to be the cost of building a new department, probably significantly less than that. Based on that, discussions with the council, and we had received direction that we should move on to phase 2, which is actually hiring architects, somebody that actually could do the actual design of what we could build, our options thereof, and developed a much more accurate estimate of what the cost was. So we could do two things. One, a go, no-go decision about what we want to do with the existing facility, and if we do build it, give us a dollar amount that we can use for purposes of financial planning and financing the project. And so that's where we are tonight. We sent out proposals to 7 different firms for this particular scope of work. We had 2 that replied. One was Wold & Associates, and the other one was Leo A. Daly Company. The 2 firms, we asked them to provide a proposal in 2 parts. Part 1 would be doing what we were talking about, the scope of work tonight. That would be the needs assessment, the operational assessment, basically developing a budget and a concept plan for the project. Part 2 was, okay, if we move beyond that and we go with you, what would be the cost for doing the construction design, bidding the project, and doing construction management for us on the project? And so there's 2 parts to their original proposals. If you looked at both firms and you rolled it all up, assuming $1 million project, The total costs weren't significantly different. Leo A. Daily was a little bit less expensive, $94,000, a little bit more than $100,000 if you wanted to go with Wold and Associates. The differences, though, there started to show up. One was the cost of the initial phase. You're looking around $9,000 for that initial phase. You're looking at 3 to 4 times that with Wold. So they're upfronting the cost with regards to the level of work they feel they need to be done or what they want to recover with their project at that particular time. Staff feels that the Lilo Daily project is beneficial because it limits our risk up front to do the examination, get us the information we need to make a decision, and if we don't decide to move any further or move further with them, the dollar amount is small, so less risk to us. Second part was the timelines that they proposed, both to get us through phase 1 and through phase 2. Leo A. Daly's timeframes were less and we felt more reasonable than Wold's. The third thing that's less tangible when we went through with both of the teams is that Leo A. Daly seemed to have a better understanding of the project, the nature of our community and our decision-making process and what we were looking for. Although Wold is a very good firm, they do a lot of work around here and they have an excellent reputation, they did seem to have as good a feel for the project. So in looking at the two firms, the initial upfront cost, the overall cost, the understanding and knowledge of the project, staff is recommending that we go with Leo A. Daly and the council authorize phase 1 of the work. So we have a recommendation before the council to approve the agreement for services with Leo A. Daly for $9,000 for the phase 1 architectural services.
It's not gonna take 20 years to build, is it?
Right.
Should have been built a long time ago.
If there's no questions.
No, go for it.
Who wants to make a motion?
Motion to approve Leo Daily.
Pursuant to the language in the staff report.
It's,
Just
yes.
as a-
Okay.
just as a-
Are they gonna switch out them globes on the garage?
No, we shouldn't keep them going.
Yeah.
We have a motion from Councilmember Zuckerman,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Schwittenberg. What did I do? Did I just butcher it? Any discussion
lead.
before we vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the police department, thank you.
We're sorry.
We didn't even really have to
We
go
love and
through
very
all
much
this. We
appreciate
were just,
your support. Yeah, it's a really bad shape building and everything you guys can do to help us out is really appreciated and thanks, yes, to Melissa Shapiro, our work. Really appreciate it.
thank you, Melissa.
Thank you guys.
We'll invite you guys over to see the icicle.
That'd be
next
great.
time. I don't know if you've heard about the icicle.
Oh, I heard about that,
Yeah.
but I didn't
Yep.
see it.
Comes right down to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Inside the building?
Yeah.
Kitchen, yes.
Yeah. It's Charlie? Is that what you
Curtis.
Curtis, sorry.
Oh, God.
Oh,
So
they,
next time it appears, we'll.
I have a picture of it, is why the police department should have a
Yeah.
Facebook page. just
That
so-
is,
Yeah. Take a picture, please, next time.
It's very much appreciated.
Well, I
absolutely.
appreciate you guys putting up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad
That-
you put up with that.
All right, next item. Authorize our city administrator to negotiate or extend a employment.
Yep, so the council had discussed this during the work session. However, during the work session, we can't take any actions, and I don't have the delegated authority to make the formal offer, so I do need a vote and a motion from the council. And based on our previous discussion, that motion would be to direct the city administrator to make an offer of employment, conditional offer of employment, to Brady Jewell for the Chief of Police Emergency Management Director position at step 4 in the 2019 salary schedule for the grade of the position.
Is that a
That's-
motion?
Yes,
Motion made by Timmerman,
whatever he just said. I'm not gonna repeat it all.
I'll second.
second by Jean Paul.
We should always have you make a motion. Always have you make a motion.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That beard.
Tom, you owe me a beer. All right. Okay, I gotta get back to my agenda here. I think that's all for general business, so on to reports.
Administration, I just wanted to update the council that we did have the hearing today at the House Tax Committee related to the sales tax reimbursement legislation we've been going after for a number of years to be reimbursed for the sales tax we paid on materials, equipment, and supplies for the construction of the water treatment facility. That equates to about $250,000 worth of reimbursement of sales tax. While it's not enough to have a huge impact on the actual water rates, it does have a huge impact on the reserves and would give us a lot more ability to control rates going forward. If you recall, last year, it was actually included in the omnibus tax bill, which was fantastic, except the governor didn't sign it. So we weren't sure what we were going to see with the change in the majority in the House this coming session, but we did get a hearing on it. As in past years, it's been laid over, which means that it's basically been taken and put in all the pile of other stuff that might get rolled into the omnibus bill. So at this point, it's out of our hands, and it's really going to come down to the 5 people who are going to negotiate this stuff later this season. We do feel that there's a chance, because it was previously in the bill, and by all accounts, this is really a nonpartisan type item, and there are people in other districts who have some representatives in other districts who have similar requests in both parties, and so we think there's a reasonable chance.
Do we have a reason to believe that Representative Vogel might be on that conference committee in the minority, one of the minority seats perhaps?
I do not.
I know we can't.
I don't know.
So, and do we have a hearing set in the Senate yet?
No. I tried to connect while I was up there today with Senator Draheim. I was advised that he was not available, so I'll be connecting with Rich, try and get a hold of him tomorrow or Monday. Representative Vogel's already been in contact with him about this issue and has already advised him, because I was copied on an email, that we'd had been in the committee hearing and it had been laid over.
Do we know of other cities that might be in a similar thing where we could get co-authors and whatever to sign on?
Our request was based on Mora. They have had their own piece of legislation that's moved forward, and I believe there may be some others that have legislation that's been proposed.
I mean, I'll be up there the next 3 weeks at various Day of the Capitol stuff, so if there's any information that I can share, or
I'd be happy to.
I'd love to swing by offices and say hello.
I'd be happy to get you
Oh, boy.
educated on that. No, I don't.
All right. Any questions for Public Works? Did Corey leave anything?
No, it'll be the same as last time, plowing. I do know that when Corey was prepping on his monthly report, he did tell me he had to scroll back through his notes a full month before he found something that wasn't snow plowing related. And that's really what they've been working on, is just if you're not plowing the snow, you're doing cleanup measures related to the snow, or you're fixing stuff that broke while it was snowing. So that's really been the focus of the department for the last few weeks.
Pass our thanks on Public Works.
They do a good job.
Police Department, Officer Bell, you have anything?
Yeah, it sounds like our background process should be done, and it sounds like we get here next week on the 2 candidates that we have in the process, and Dave and Tom and I should be able to sit down and choose someone to go to psych and medical, and hopefully get a new officer going here shortly.
All right. Anyone have anything for Officer Bell? All right, Fire Department, assuming there was nothing to be passed on there. Engineering,
I have nothing.
it's a win for all of us.
What we pay you for?
Community Development, any notes from Renee?
No.
Or any additional comments? Parks, the meeting, or the minutes were included. Other committee reports, Scale was that next week?
We have executive committee tomorrow morning, and then full membership meeting will be the Friday after.
Okay. MVTA.
That was yesterday, and I didn't attend
All right.
for obvious reasons.
I-35.
That was a couple weeks ago when I was sick and wasn't here.
All right. Moving right along. Chamber already provided an update, CCEC.
Yeah, we're just planning the Easter egg hunt My son is gonna be the Easter Bunny.
Really?
Yeah, he is, 'cause apparently there wasn't one last year. And we are looking at possibly putting in a ordinance for food trucks.
All right, that'd be cool.
Just a note that if, I know it's a long ways away, Christmas is a long ways away from now, but I have a full Santa suit, and dress up as
Yeah.
Santa Claus, so if there's any need for that.
Nice.
Oh, there's a need for
There's
that.
a-
If there's an elf
Yeah.
joke, I ain't coming to anymore.
That's got Jean
Tree
Paul all
lighting, we
over it.
always need a Santa for the tree lighting.
Just officially announced.
Wow, that is spectacular.
No downtown improvement committee.
No.
On to discussion by council. I have two brief things, but if anybody else has anything.
I was just gonna say that I was at the Scott County Human Services Resource Council, and Savage got the IRTS, the intensive treatment center or whatever, and it's going to the Savage Council on Tuesday, maybe, perhaps? So there might be a few of us there just to kind of be in support. It sounds like there might be not a lot of pushback this go around, but until it actually gets in front of the council and get public going, we'll see. So
And when is that?
this week coming up, like Tuesday or Wednesday, I think maybe Wednesday it might be.
Okay.
So.
Quick things. One, we briefly discussed at the last council meeting, some resolution being passed by other cities within Scott County regarding fees and how they can be assessed with new construction. The Prior Lake City Council had passed their resolution 5-0, has asked us to take a look at it, so Tom is gonna be putting something together for the next council meeting to look at, so I just want to follow up on that. And retreat, are we at a point where we can start looking at dates?
I've already made calls and I'm getting available dates
Oh.
from council, so I just have a couple more folks to talk to and,
I'm one of them.
yep.
Okay, sweet. That's all I have. Anyone else? Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Timmerman,
Second.
second by Seepersod. Assuming no discussions, all in favor?
Aye.